Hi, this is Mr. Sterling, and this video is going to be about the Clarinet technical etude for the FMS region auditions. I'll begin by playing the technical etude, and then I'll be talking about some things we can do to help in our preparation of the etude. If you're wanting to skip ahead to where I talk about the etude, you can go to about a minute and 5 seconds, and that's where I'll begin talking about the etude. I'd recommend that you have your music out to follow along for both portions of the video, and thank you guys for watching. Now we're going to talk about some things that will help with your preparation of the technical etude for your audition. The first thing I'd like to point out, which is the first thing I always look for when I look at any new piece of music, is the key signature, time signature, and tempo marking. Our key signature is D major, which means that all Fs will be F sharps and all Cs will be C sharps throughout the entire etude. Our time signature is 4/4, meaning that the quarter note gets the beat and there are 4 beats per measure. And our tempo marking is quarter note equals 80 to 88. We'll certainly start much slower as we work our way up to that tempo. The next thing I'd like to point out is 2 articulation patterns that happen frequently throughout the etude. The first one is the very first thing you see in measure 1. It's 2 slurred sixteenths followed by 2 articulated sixteenths. D, D, D. And you see that very frequently throughout the entire etude. 2 things to note regarding that articulation pattern is it stays the same every single time that we have 4 16th notes back to back, except for on beat 3 of measure 8. So make sure that you don't do it there, since we've been doing it for every single other group of 16th notes throughout the piece. The other thing to note is that as you start getting faster, this likely won't be a problem at first. But as you get faster, you're going to want to rush through the slurred sixteenths. So be aware of that and put a little bit of extra emphasis on those as you start increasing your tempo later in the preparation process. The other frequent articulation pattern that we see is an 8th note followed by 2 16ths. You can see this at measure 5, 6, 7, and 8. D, 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 D. And the important thing to note here is that those 8th notes should be long. Many of us are going to have a tendency to want to lift those 8th notes and make them shorter. They should be long and touch the next 16th note every single time. The next thing I'd like to talk about is our breathing. Most of our breaths should be able to fall on rests most of the time, which is really good. The only thing, especially as we're playing it much more slowly to start before we up our tempo, is we'll have to add in a couple of extra ones on quarter notes at the end of measures. The places I'd like us to add those in, at least for the beginning, we'll likely take at least some of these out as we go and increase tempo later in the process. On beat 4 of measure 6, beat 4 of measure 8, and beat 4 of measure 10. Add in a breath mark at the end of those measures. And that breath should be about an 8th note or less, depending on how slowly you're going. And we'll remove these as we get faster, but those will be necessary as we play slower to have enough air to play. Then I'd like to talk about accidentals just a little bit. At the first measure, we've got a D sharp, which is thumb register 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, RP1. In measure 2, we have a G sharp, which is our G sharp key here. The important thing to note with this, in terms of being able to play that measure accurately, is we want to keep our fingers close to the keys and not have our hand collapse or index finger point up like this, or won't be able to get back for the B that follows it in time. I want to make sure that we use our resonance fingering, have our right hand down to be able to play the B that follows that note as well. Then our next accidentals are in measure 8, the G sharp and the A sharp, which the G sharp is the same as the note we just talked about. In measure 2, and the A sharp is the same as our B flat. Want to have our resonance fingerings down for both of those notes again. and we'll also want to keep our fingers close to the keys to be able to play the beat that follows it yet again. Then we have an A sharp in measure 10 again, which again is the same as our B flat, and then an A sharp in measure 12 on beat 3. The important thing to note in measure 12 is that the A sharp carries through to the 4th 16th note of beat 3. So that's something that we definitely want to make sure we mark in. And that little 16th note going from beat 3 into beat 4 of measure 12 is probably one of the trickier parts of those etudes. So I would recommend looking at that particular couple of beats in that measure early on and often as you prepare this etude. Just in general, as we practice faster technique, there are two things that we can do to make sure that we practice it in a way that is efficient and effective for your time and your own productive practice. Start out slowly, slower than you think you need to, and play slowly often. Even as we get farther along in the preparation process, go back and play it slower again. Even if you're near full tempo, keep playing it slowly and often so that you don't start to ingrain mistakes too frequently. You want to play it correctly more often than you play it incorrectly. We also should isolate spots that are giving us trouble. Even if it's just 2 notes, practice those 2 notes back to back and then add a note before it or add a note after it. And then slowly increase the amount that you're playing and put it back into context. But start with very small sections of music and then add them back in. Don't just play the whole thing over and over again at a fast tempo, or you're not going to get better, you're only going to stay the same. If you have any more questions, please ask, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in sectionals. Best of luck and happy practicing.